Thank you so much, Ambassador, for showing us exactly how that's done. And I'm glad you talked about there being offices too, because we were beginning to forget. And you know, I know from personal experience, because when I first reached out to you to ask for you to come and participate in this discussion, you responded almost immediately. And I was amazed at that. And she's retained that format of correspondence, being extremely prompt all through since then. So I think you're clearly a personal example of how to manage a very pressing work schedule with wonderful abilities to interact and be approachable. And I know there are lots of questions for the ambassador, but I'm going to now invite our other two panelists for this session so we can talk to all of them together. And do keep sending in your questions. So please join me in welcoming first Mr. Daryl Arnold, founder of Ocean Protocol and Connected Life and chairman of DEX. Daryl is a serial entrepreneur experienced in data marketing, technology, and sustainability. And he's had several successful exits in the digital marketing space, and now focuses on smart cities, open data, health diagnostics, and active aging. I should also say that Daryl is a keen snowboarder, a competitive squash player, and a happily married father of 3. Welcome, Daryl. Also joining us today is Mr. Walter de Oude, founder and CEO of Singapore Life, who started off as an actuary, so he knows everything there is to know about life insurance, and he probably put that to good use to achieve what could have been considered impossible, starting a life insurance company from scratch. Prior to starting Singapore Life, he was CEO of HSBC Insurance and is on the board of HSBC Asset Management. Welcome, Walter. So we have a wonderfully inspiring panel. For one thing, as far as sports are concerned, I mean, we've covered competitive squash, we have cycling, we have snowboarding. I don't know if my yoga sessions count. But Walter, we didn't get around to discussing what you like to play, but given the average profile of the panel, you're probably a triathlon athlete or something.
Well, the Dutch take a bicycle to work, I take a skateboard.
Oh, yeah. Wonderful, there we go. Okay. So, you know, the theme of the discussion today is work, family 4.0. And we want to explore this from many different dimensions. We want to talk about perhaps health and aging. We want to talk, of course, about balance that we started off discussing already. We want to talk about education and being skills ready. So I'm going to start off with a few questions to our panelists, and then we leave the floor open. And I hope you're sending in your questions through Pigeonhole already. Walter, I saw something on the Sing Life website, which I think is a wonderful way to start us off. So I'm going to try and quote that, if I can read it. So it describes Sing Life as an insurer hoping to create a better life insurance experience by using the efficiency that technology creates. And you've been personally described as a disruptor in the insurance space. So tell us a little bit about how you're leveraging technology to create better life experiences for your clients. And it can go beyond insurance, and I'm sure it does.
Sure, that's right. The insurance industry is one of those industries that everybody has always said is very old school, very old fashioned, it's pedantic, it takes too long to get your life insurance sorted out, and it just has not kept pace with the digital innovation that we've seen in every other industry around us. So when we looked at the industry, we said, well, actually, surely we can do better than what currently exists. So our ambition was really to take all of the efficiency that technology provides and turn that into better value to customers. Now, life insurance is one of those things that everybody needs. We all have family that we love, people that we would worry about us if we weren't around. And when Singapore Life started, we thought, well, how do we make it super, super easy with a couple of clicks on your mobile phone to actually give yourself and your family the peace of mind that you need in order to just make sure that actually life is actually okay. I can worry less because if anything happens, my family is okay. So all of you can this afternoon on your way home in a taxi, go to www.singlife.com and buy some life insurance in about 10 minutes flat. It'll be as cheap as chips. It's done in a super easy way by a fully regulated life insurance company in Singapore. We are the first new life insurance company to be regulated in Singapore in the last 50 years, since 1970, which is a testament to Singapore's ambition to present digital-first financial services in a way that is in the best interest and benefit of our customers. Thanks, Vinika.
Wonderful. And we'll forgive you that little plug for saying that. So, but I think what's really important from what you said is, how you're able to then bring down costs. Because I know one of the concerns that a lot of people have when we think about living longer is healthcare costs, which are going to go up and which are going up. And we see our parents struggling with that, for instance. So it's really encouraging to hear you say that. And I remember in a previous discussion, I took some notes. You mentioned that traditional models can involve 1,000 people, and the same thing can perhaps now be done with only 4, which I found really intriguing in some cases. So do you think healthcare costs are then going to come down, or what are we thinking of?
Well, technology is a great thing because you can take away processes which are historically done by human beings. And if you can take those processes out, you can deliver things much more efficiently. And when you can take efficiency out, if you improve efficiency, you can give better value and better cost. Now, in the healthcare sector, it's slightly different because it's much more around utilization rather than technology. But what our ambition then is, rather than look at the healthcare sector, we've now done that in the life insurance space. And what we have to do next is to propel that use of technology into the long-term savings and wellness and long-term retirement provision, which will give better value to customers over a longer period of time. We were speaking earlier about the efficiency and comparing, say, Singapore Life to other life insurance companies. And what takes other life insurance companies, say, 1,000 people to do as an operating business, we do with about 40 people.
14 or 4. Wonderful. Thank you. So just moving to you, Daryl, now, a very simple but important question, building on what Walter's just shared. Given your interest and experience with healthcare and active aging, which is something that we're very interested in when we talk about work and family and living longer, just very simply, how can we ensure that we don't just live longer, we also live better?
So I think it's probably just worth mentioning, my whole participation in this space is a complete accident, driven by a negative experience that, 20 years ago, my mum died of cancer, and then 18 months later, my dad had a heart attack because he hadn't been looking after himself. Mum wasn't around, so he was eating badly, exercising badly, and he had this negative experience. And it was only because the next door neighbor popped around that he's still living today, playing with his 3 grandchildren and enjoying life. And at that time, I felt that potentially there was a massive role for technology in avoiding such a situation, helping my dad to live a better, healthier life, but also if something negative does happen, that help could be on hand in an automated fashion. And so we spent a lot of time, I'm going to use all the buzzwords, so I apologize, the application of the Internet of Things, deep learning, et cetera, to be able to develop systems and solutions to address that. So the first thing that we've understood, by helping older adults age in place, we've been using Internet of Things to collect 5,000 data points per day on individuals living here in Singapore. And what we've learned from that is if they eat well, they sleep well, and they can exercise well, we can help them produce health. So rather than helping them produce a better quality of life, right, feeling better about themselves, because they're out and about, they're less lonely. And loneliness is probably the biggest killer out there right now for aging populations. So it's trying to create the conditions for a vibrant life within the community and with their family. So that was the sort of the first key learning. And Internet of Things technology enables us to do this kind of stuff. The other thing that we discovered was that, of course, as you age, you start to have chronic conditions, right? I think it's like 7 out of 10 older adults have one, maybe, and then slightly fewer have 2 chronic conditions. And we were able to demonstrate from using sort of wearables in particular, we were able to generate actually 4 million data points about an individual each day, which could then be used to objectively measure their symptoms if they're living with Parkinson's, or be able to predict a worsening of their New York Heart Association classification with reference to chronic heart failure. And so if providing this data, these objective measurements, particularly around motor state, to doctors could completely transform the way that they provide care to that individual. So instead of having that 15 minutes every 3 months with that person with PD, and trying to make some calibration and observation, which fundamentally is about 40% wrong, they're able to get a 24/7 report of these symptoms, and the doctor can spend their time calibrating the diet, the lifestyle, the medication to improve the quality of life of that person with PD. And this is a damn good use of expensive doctor resources. Let the technology do the mundane stuff and allow our creativity in individuals provide better outcomes.
So doctors can then perhaps move from a more almost to a preventive way of looking at medicine as opposed to trying to be curative.
Yes, I mean, as doctors, I mean, my colleagues are fundamentally trained to be reactive, right? So, which again seems to be a real waste of resources when we have technology to enable them to be more proactive and produce better outcomes or better lifestyle scenarios for those. And this will just yield better results and better returns on investment for taxpayers, and actually fundamentally better quality of life, not just for the individual, but also their family and that more informal social care environment, which is completely underfunded, embarrassingly, from the country I come from, the UK, and I know Singapore's trying to address that as we speak today.
And perhaps just to, one of the other points you mentioned was in terms of perhaps the need for better rest.
Yeah.
And that's something that, again, when I'm talking to colleagues at work and friends outside, given technology and given the fact that we're always connected, one of the things that's becoming most challenging is getting rest.
Sure.
And I know you manage that well.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so how many people are answering emails right now? Put your hands up, because I can see you. So fundamentally, there's an issue here. Saturday, Sunday maybe is a time for us spending time with our families. I mean, not sitting in a room. That's kind of an interesting one. But also, we're constantly connected. So, answering an email at 11 o'clock at night or 1 o'clock in the morning clearly cannot be good for our mental health. So while we can talk, and our employers, our sort of society will talk about, you must eat better, you must rest better, you must exercise, yet there's still an expectation, at least in the professional classes, that we're always connected and always responding. So whether that's to emails at 11 o'clock or 1 o'clock in the morning or 9 o'clock on Saturday, that cannot be good for our mental health. And I know personally, I refuse to reply to any emails, take any calls after 9 o'clock, personally because they typically piss me off. And so as a result of that, I sleep badly. And then I'm miserable to my kids in the morning, and my wife gets agitated by me. These are the factors that we need to have in balance, and there's responsibility for our well-being, the stuff we put into our bodies, as well as how we're expected to play out every day. And so, yeah, you know this. I refuse to read emails that are CC'd on me. I refuse to reply to emails that are typically sent to me, unless it's sent to me 3 times. But that gives me an extra 4 hours a day to basically spend with my children or be creative, which is what we really want.
I have to tell you, because Daryl mentioned this rule about not responding to an email unless it came 3 times to me in another panel we were part of. So when I invited him to speak here, I sent him the same email 3 times quickly. And I did get my response. So if we switch now to you, Margriet, one of the things that you didn't have a chance to discuss in the presentation, but which you mentioned when we spoke earlier, and I know this is close to your heart. Now, one challenge that we also have as we think about Life 4.0 and all the challenges it will bring is about the sustainability of food production and agriculture. And I know you feel strongly about this and have some interesting ideas on that. So, what can you tell us about that? One of the things you mentioned to me once, I remember, was that suddenly being a farmer is becoming cool. And you have high-tech individuals who are beginning to move into farming. How does that play out?
Thank you for that question, because I do believe that the world is changing and the food production as well. And I see in the Netherlands a lot of IT graduates, and also here in Singapore, who are going to be our new urban farmers. And I think that's the future of farming, that you have high-tech farming indoors, inside the city. Also in Singapore, the Dutch are working with Singaporean government there as well, but also in India, to have the fresh greens, the organic food, because you can have 3 harvests Because with LED lighting and reusing the water and lesser energy, it's actually also a more sustainable way of farming in the future. And then you keep the rice, the corn, the staple food outside of the cities. But what you see is that those IT nerds do need old school farmers as well. So it's interesting to see where the initiative came from the high-tech Food Valley universities, NTU here, that they try to line up to the old-fashioned, crunchy farmers and then come up with better food and better results. I try to serve it when I host luncheons and dinners at my own residence, because actually, if you look even in Singapore, you can have your whole meal with homegrown food. You just have to find it, and it's absolutely 100% safe, and there's a bigger profit margin for the farmers.
That's excellent, and I believe there's collaboration between Netherlands and Singapore in terms of vertical farming.
Yes, indeed.
Excellent, great. And I know we have some IIM MBAs actually who are also working on bringing technology to agriculture. I have two former students who are very actively engaged in that, and they're both actually IT consultants in their previous careers and are now successful agricultural entrepreneurs. One in Africa and one in India, so absolutely empathize with what you're saying. I'm moving now to try and take a few questions from the audience, and we have many coming in, so let me try and pick a couple, and you can decide who'd like to answer this. In Singapore, we lose jobs just because we're over 50. It might be a bit of an ageist society. Given the cost of living and hardly any social security, we focus on making money to survive. Please comment on how to be happy. Could you reflect that question on the screen so it's easier for the panelists? It's the question with 19 votes. So there, it's behind us. I'm sorry, you'll have to turn around. But if I can say this again for you. So do you think it's an ageist society, we're losing jobs if you're over 50, and given that and the cost of living, it's going to be very difficult to be happy and to have balance in Singapore? Go ahead.
Sure, I think we all have to plan for our retirements. I think that's a fundamental part of what we do. I think from a workforce perspective, we see many of our companies in Singapore extending retirement ages and trying to actively find roles for those who are, for elder members of the community. We see a very strong push by our Singapore regulator to encourage silver workforce and keep that going. I think from our perspective as a business, we look at our staff in the same way as we look at our customers. We don't see any real difference between the capabilities of a 20-year-old and a 60-year-old. Everybody is technologically enabled today. Everybody has got the same needs to fund a family or plan for a future and have a provision and make provision along the way. So our job is to make technical tools available to the workforce so that we can get the best out of them, whether you're 20 years old or 60 years old.
Daryl, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, the whole concept of multi-generational workforce is absolutely fascinating. For the second time, we're going to be opening up a business in Japan. And so, Japan's fascinating for me because of the aging population. It needs to go embrace technology and bring about certain types of productivity enhancements. And while AI, robots can do a lot of the mundane, I do ask myself the question when I'm traveling on the trains and seeing this beaten down, frustrated, tired workforce, where's the youthful energy going to come from? So you've got this sort of interesting demographics, because when I look at my children and their enthusiasm and excitement and recklessness when they see a snail in the garden, that's what you get from these 20s and 30-somethings. They make mistakes, they're reckless, they're optimistic. Yeah, and that's a special dynamic that I'm unclear about how we're going to be able to replace. And when I think about my wife's grandfathers who came from China in the 30s to Singapore, it was their enthusiasm, their belief that they could do anything, and their instincts for survival. I'm not sure that comes with youth. I'm not sure where that comes in, say, that Japanese aging society, and can AI and robots replace that? And that's a curious one for me.
Would you like to add something?
Well, what we do in the Netherlands now is with job applications, we try to limit discrimination on gender or age. So we have sort of an algorithm who goes about that, because you see that there's a sort of unconscious bias that when you hire a new employee, he or she should be youthful, have the newest technologies, where you see the best profits if you have a sort of very diverse population in your workforce. But we do notice that we need to nudge it a little bit, otherwise you lose some of the productivity of the older workforce. And what we also see is that we have many more seniors in the Netherlands working part-time, so that they're part-time enjoying life and part-time still being part of the workforce. And that's also a way to keep the level of happiness.
I think that's a good segue into another question that has a lot of votes. So the question is, how ready are companies today to embrace work, like integration, as an important tool to retain and motivate employees? Why is it taking so long to accept flexibility as a norm? The whole idea of more flexibility at work, having part-time jobs available, for instance, doesn't seem to be happening as much as we want, perhaps. And so the question is about, what do you think needs to change?
I would like to start with that one, because the Netherlands has a lot of flexibility at work, and it makes it more difficult as a manager. It was much easier for me to manage my staff when I just had to look in their offices, are they there or not? Now very often I have no clue where they are, and I have to sort of assess their work results, which is much more difficult, especially for the manager, but much more rewarding for the employee. And I think you need a different kind of management and also a different kind of rewards of managers. And that means you have to reward trust, but you also have to be able to toughen it out, and if somebody is not getting any results, to say we have to part ways. Sure. I do believe it's the future, but it was actually a hard road myself to become that kind of manager who's more flexible.
You mentioned when you were on presenting earlier that when you did this piece of survey about what do people think about it, what do they feel about going their work at the moment, and you said people feel stressed or overwhelmed were the words you used. We make a specific objective to make sure that people wake up in the morning and say, yay, I'm going to work today. When you asked that question of me, the word that came into my head was supercharged. I love going to work because we are doing awesome stuff. We talk about how to be happy in our work, in our community. We're happy and engaged when we love what we do. We're happy and engaged when we love the people that we're working with. These flexibility and the flexible work around, yes, that's all part of the thing, but it's not the flexibility of work that drives happiness. It's the engagement around the work, whether that's at home or in the office. It doesn't matter. We've taken steps in our organization to try as far as practically possible to destroy the hierarchical approach on management. Normally you have a CEO and then you have an exco team and then you have people underneath it. What we've tried to do is to say there's none of that. We have projects. We have this particular thing that needs to be delivered, and these people are there to deliver that one thing. And the boss is the KPIs about whether or not those things are being delivered, yes or no. And if it's done, everybody's scored well, and if it's not done, then people are scored badly. So that you don't have to just win the approval of your line manager in terms of your career progression. You have to win the approval of the entire organization in terms of your contribution. And in that community, you get happiness and motivation and stimulation. And as a result, Singapore Life is delivering more technology faster than anything I've ever seen in my career so far, because it's about engagement with people.
Yeah, I'm excited to go to work in insurance. You're definitely disrupting the traditional model. And Daryl, you had a point.
So I think there are different challenges for startups, small organizations versus large ones. And with one of my old businesses, we did everything by the book, investors in people. We ticked every single box, and we had this wonderful certificate on the wall. It was worthless. It was a waste of time, because what I realized, we were doing all of these different activities to compensate for the fact people had crap jobs. So we threw all the pool tables away, all the bean bags, all the massages, all of the lunch strategy days, we threw all of that away and focused entirely enabling people to do amazing work that they could be proud and brag about. to their colleagues. So it's easier in small teams, but when you talk about the application of deep learning to the objective symptom measurement as somebody living with Parkinson's, reducing the cost of that care by 50% or more and improving their quality of life, that's something to be proud of. And it's easier for smaller businesses to do that, admittedly, but that's where we focus all of our time. And personally, this is a bit out of the way, I really do not give a shit about my employees. I just give a shit about enabling them to do amazing things.
Now, we do have some children in the audience, so I'm going to ask a question that's relevant to them, and it has a lot of votes. Children may not always be happy because they're working very hard at school with very little free time. Studies, studies, and more studies. It can take away from creativity. So how do you feel about that?
I feel that children here indeed have less time to do a sport than in the Netherlands. Because in the Netherlands, after school, most parents think because we want to raise you, you have to do at least one sport, maybe perhaps two, and there's time in their schedule. Here, I think there's more pressure on your homework, on school, and in the one hand it's great because you get the best educated kids in the world who are ready for the future. But what I do find, an example, Singapore invests more in innovation than the Netherlands, but the Netherlands has many more patents who make money. And why is that? Because it's mostly accidentally or somebody rogue or somebody who's passionate. And I think sometimes you just need to invest in like doing nothing and it will be a reward later. So yeah. I hope that maybe 1 hour a day for every child can make a difference.
I mean, one of the biggest challenges Singapore has, it is paradise in a city. This is such an amazing country. It's just everything works. And so what you don't then have is that kind of creative tension that you have in communities where things are really bad and people have to fight to break out. And I think that's really, really interesting dynamic when I think about where I came from in the UK and what I grew up in compared to the privileges that my children have. It's incredible. The other thing that we've been able to demonstrate and model out is that bad behavior by children or an unhappiness is correlated with the time that they have with their parents, right? So trying to be able to spend more time with your kids, whether it's doing sport or hanging out, talking about music or whatever, is definitely a key factor in the kids' ability to be happy, and if they're happy, they're more likely to be curious, they're more likely to learn, etc., etc., etc.
Yeah. And the knock-on effects. We learned in our keynote address this morning that we overteach our children. And my view is that every amount of education that we give is actually, in many ways, reducing the ability for children to be creative. And I see with my own children, if they're not at school, they're actually doing something creative. I think in our world of iPads and all that kind of stuff, I think that's also limiting creativity. And in our time-bound world as parents, we rely on these things too much and creativity suffers. But then we also talk about coming back to things like healthcare and costs of healthcare and rising stuff and the influences that parents have on children. I think that the biggest problem, and we talked about technology, that technology can never solve is something just as simple as greed. We teach our children that if you want to make money and have a happy life and in lots of money, be a doctor, because doctors make lots of money. And then now we all sit here on podiums and we say, well, the costs of healthcare has risen so much. What is technology going to do about it? But we actually realize that the root cause is not technology or increasing healthcare costs. It's the greed of doctors that has been inspired by parents and educators indoctrinating children in a certain direction. So we need to be very mindful of how the whole total ecosystem of what we believe in affects the status of our community, of the place in which we work, the families in which we operate, and the future of our civilization. Sorry.
So the questions are getting more and more creative. So we certainly don't lack creativity in this part of Singapore. And I'm going to ask this exciting one. How will spousal relationships change as we think about Life 4.0? Will people stay monogamous for 100 plus years? It's a very creative question, and it has 26 votes. So who's going to tackle that one? Daryl, go for it.
So I didn't get married until I was 43, Before I was 43, I basically lived in Japan, the US, UK, many different places. And so I had some wonderful experiences, and then I found the girl of my dreams. So like it or not, I believe I'm going to live until I'm 120. Hopefully she will be. So she's stuck with me for life.
That's good to hear. Any other comments?
Yeah, I think it might change, and maybe it will be an exciting ride to the future. For the moment, I'm married for 28 years, and I have one husband. He has one wife with 12 saxophones, so that way we try to balance our marriage.
I've been married 19 years to a wonderful South African woman, and I can tell you I have put her through hell. Anybody that starts a business from scratch, going through the whole entrepreneurial process, raising capital, building things up, you work harder than you've ever worked in your entire life. And she has been there as a backbone and a pillar and a support for me. And if I can spend the next 200 years with her, I'll be thrilled. Yeah.
Cool.
We have a panel that's really an advertisement for monogamy. I've been married to the same man for many years, and happily too. So that's great. Okay. We have time for perhaps one or two more questions. So I'm going to switch to something a little bit different, which actually will be addressed later in the day also. Were humans ever meant to live till 100? With already so much pressure on resources, what are the impacts to our environment as we start to live longer? There'll be a lot of discussion about this in the sessions to come, but maybe a quick overview from the panel.
I think that actually we are going to be more and more aware of the impact we have on our environment. And I see a shift in sustainability attitude. It starts with the younger generations, wherever you are in the world, but it's picked up by their parents, because probably you know it yourself, that your kids are asking you, what are you doing about the plastics? How is your business going environmentally? And I think that pressure upwards is going to be until we are 100 or more. So in a way, I'm quite optimistic that through the generations, we are going to be more aware and are willing to make the drastic action that's needed.
For sure. The older the longer that we understand we're going to live, I think the more aware we're going to be and the more responsible we're going to become. Because, you know, when we're trying to provide, say, solutions for people aging, quite often, going back 5 years ago, most people say, I don't need this, I'm going to die in 2 or 3 years. Why waste the money on me? But actually, we're seeing quite a change now. We're starting to see people think, actually, maybe I am going to be around until I'm 85 or 90 or 95. And so maybe I need to be a lot more considered and responsible for my family and also basically the world around me.
I think it's all about how to make provision for yourself. If we all know that we're going to potentially live to 100, I think that most people are not saving enough for that eventuality. Costs will grow up, and global warming will go up, and all these things. But what people and what we need to teach our children is start saving now. Put money away, because you need to fund the fact that you're not going to die when you're 80, you're going to die when you're 100. You need to think about it now. You need to put money away in a simple, easy way to save. Find something that's suitable for you, your family, and encourage people, because the issue is not going to be, you know, can we sustain a world of, or keep an environment that's collaborative and clean and global warming. That's not it at all. It's can we put food on the table for ourselves? As we see the divide between the rich and the poor getting bigger, people are struggling just to get from 1 month to the next on their salaries while they are working. How are they going to get from age 60 to age 100 without making proper provision? And that's a real thing which I'd love to be able to provide a solution for.
There's a comment I want to share, more a comment than a question, and it applies directly to the Netherlands. The most amazing idea from the Netherlands is the co-living concept, where college students and retirees live in communities, each group supporting and contributing to the other. And this has come in from the audience, so just wanted to share that with you.
Yeah,
so, you know, we've spoken about many different things. We've talked about aging, we've talked about creativity, a little bit about skills. Just to put things in perspective as we conclude, somebody was sharing with me, you know, the government in Singapore, of course, runs all sorts of programs for reskilling, for making sure we're ready for the future in terms of education. And I read and I heard from somebody also that there are 2 programs that are the most popular in this list of programs to which you can apply to reskill and prepare for the future. Now, I don't know if you've heard of what these programs are, and I see some smiles, so you probably are thinking of what I'm thinking of. Among the most popular programs that people apply for are, one, learning to speak Korean. Now, that sounds interesting. Do you know why they want to learn to speak Korean? Absolutely, to be able to watch and understand K-pop serials, TV serials. And the other one which I found very interesting was learning to make cupcakes. And the reason for wanting to learn to make cupcakes, not just to eat them, is because it makes for very cute Instagram pics. So very much a life 4.0, generation 4.0 kind of response to that. And I'm saying this as I conclude, just to bring to the fore the fact that whatever our concerns in terms of how life 4.0 is going to be and how we're going to live better and age better, the spirit of human resilience will mean that we'll always manage to find some ways to find joy, to find some enjoyment and fun, and manage to live meaningful lives with both work and family in balance. So I want to thank the audience for some wonderful questions. We haven't managed to answer all, but we've gotten through quite a few. And do join me in congratulating the panel for their views and thanking them for being here. Thank you.